Okay, now this is the scene where Jake is having problems writing characters. Let's watch the actors rehearsing the scene before we go ahead and get into it.
It's not writing.
Right.
Okay. Honey, this doesn't sound like something anyone would say.
I guess it's one of those things that, you know, looks good on paper, but doesn't sound so good out loud.
Well, I definitely do think it needs some more.
These characters, they're like flat and lifeless. I mean, I have to turn them into real people.
Well, maybe they're lifeless because you don't know anything about them and they're not even real yet.
Alright. What if, you know how on the back jacket of a novel, they'll have a whole bio of the author and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
What if I just make like a bio of each character? Like a whole life story.
Well, that should work. I mean, it's only your first draft, so now that you have some perspective on this, you can go back and change it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, I think you should.
Comes with coffee.
All right, well that was cool, just to kind of get an idea of how they rehearse. So let's go ahead and do some white balancing right now. Notice that we're white balancing off of the warm card system again here, and that's allowing us to create a lower color temperature in the camera than it would normally measure in that particular room. This is the standard preset, Daylight 5600K white balance, and here in just a moment we're going to go ahead and switch to the warm cards warm 1. This is the exact same scene, same lighting, same everything, but just with a different white balance. So white balance can do a lot of incredible things for your image without really doing a lot more as far as your lighting and as far as the set. This is just with existing colors in the set and existing lighting. Let's talk about audio. We have one of our receivers right there, receiver number 1, and that receiver is going into channel 1 on the camera. And then we also have our receiver number 2, and that receiver is going into the other channel on the camera, which is channel number 2, as you can see with that XLR cable where it's hooked in right there. That allows us to have two completely separate transmitters transmitting from the actors into two separate receivers on the camera. Just as a test for you guys, we're going to also transmit to just one receiver, and we're also going to use a shotgun going into channel 2 on the camera as well. And that's going to allow us to do a little bit of a test so you can hear exactly what this scene would sound like. We also tested the on-camera microphone, which on the HVX naturally is always being recorded at channels 3 and 4, no matter what you're doing with inputs 1 and 2 on the XLR. The camera's always recording channels 3 and 4 through the built-in on-camera microphone. And we're going to also listen to that too. On other scenes, we use the shotgun microphone going into only channel 2 instead of just channel 1. Notice that channel 1 is empty right there. When we use a shotgun going into channel 2, what it allows you to do is to essentially split that signal into two separate channels that are being recorded on the camera. And when you do that, it allows you to set up one channel as being higher in gain and one channel as being lower in gain. And that what that allows you to do is that essentially you don't have to ride the levels the entire time. The channel with the higher gain can pick up all the low sounds, and the channel with the lower gain can pick up all the high sounds. And that way, no matter what in editing, you always have two channels. One of them is going to be right for that particular scene. So let's go ahead and listen to some audio tests that we did in this particular room.
Jake, this doesn't sound like something anyone would say.
I know. It's one of those things, it looks good on paper, but it just doesn't sound good out loud.
Jake, this doesn't sound like something anyone would say.
I know. It's one of those things, it looks good on paper, but it just doesn't sound good out loud.
Jake, this doesn't sound like something anyone would say.
I know. It's one of those things, it looks good on paper, but it just doesn't sound good out loud.
Jake, this doesn't sound like something anyone would say.
I know. It's one of those things, it looks good on paper, but it just doesn't sound good out loud.
Okay, so that gives you a few options next time you show up in the set. You know pretty much what you would like to use to get what kind of sounds. So let's go ahead and talk about the dolly move that we used. You can see the dolly track is right there, and we're only using a portion of it. This is going to only be a 4-foot dolly move for this entire scene. Now here's the Kinoflow lights that we were using last night. They're wrapped up in the corner over here. We can't use them anymore right now because it's daylight, and at this point in daylight, because there's a lot of light coming through the windows, we need a lot more power, or we would need to use larger Kinoflow units, which we don't have. What we do have, though, is the HMIs that we learned about earlier in the production section. And the HMI 400 watt ARRI light right there is going to put out a lot of light. And there's another 200 watt right there sitting next to the window. And that 200 watt is going to mimic the light coming from the window by creating an edge light. Because normally, even though there's window light coming through, but it's not going to actually affect our image, it's just going to detract from the image. So you notice the placement of that light, and we're going to show it to you from a few more angles so you know exactly where it is in relation to the actors on the set. There it is in relation to the camera. It's coming in from right around the right side. It's going to go ahead and fill in their faces, but also create a little bit of a very soft rim light that is very convincing and makes it feel like the light's coming from the window. Now we're going to go ahead and listen to our DP, Evan, and he's going to tell us a little bit about HMI lighting.
Most HMIs you don't want to hot restrike unless they literally are only like under 30 seconds between hot and cold. Simply because the mercury inside of the HMI can fog and atomize on the inside of the bulb, and it reduces the life of the bulb.
So essentially what he was talking about is what's called a hot restrike, which is when you turn off the HMI light and then very quickly turn it back on without giving it some time to cool down. And some lights allow you to do that, like the ARRI lights allow you to do that, but at the same time some other manufacturers make lights that don't allow you to do that. And the HMI bulb, which is a very expensive bulb, but sometimes it's $500–600 or even more than that, will actually atomize and will reduce the life of that bulb if you hot restrike it, which means as soon as you turn off the HMI light, you turn it right back on without waiting for about at least 30 seconds or longer sometimes. So again, that's what a hot restrike is. Okay, so let's talk about the beam path that this light is making right there. It's sitting right next to the window, and that's the beam path that it's creating right there. It's hitting them from the right side of their faces, and it's filling in their faces for when the dolly is in that particular position. You'll find that sometimes you'll have to put these lights in some pretty obscure positions sometimes just for the dolly's sake. So when you go ahead and turn it off, that's the look. That's what you're actually losing when you turn off that particular light. You'll notice that it feels very flat at this point because all you're getting is just a main 400 watt ARRI HMI being bounced through the circular white reflector disc on the other side right there. So this light in particular is off right now, and we're going to go ahead and see what the ARRI light is doing right now on the other side. We're just using two lights, that's it. So here comes the ARRI light, and I want to go ahead and draw your attention to something. On this particular ARRI unit, it has two dials on the back, two black dials. One of them, the one in the back, allows you to actually focus the light and spot it and flood it. However, the one in the front actually will unscrew the light assembly from the housing. So you want to be careful which one you touch and which one you actually rotate to focus and defocus the light. So there's where the light is. That's a 400 watt HMI. You can see it right there, and it's bouncing through that light disc right there on the right side, which is also sitting on its own stand. It's creating a larger surface, and it's shining into that. And when a light like that shines into a disc like that, it allows you to put the disc even further away and make a very large, softer source out of a very small source like the ARRI. And that's what is created on the other side. It's a very large, soft source through that circular disc. It's just a circular reflector disc that we've been using on the other productions pretty much the entire time. And it's just about a $100 disc that you can buy very easily. It has 5 different surfaces, and each one of them will give you a whole different kind of look. Now let's go ahead and see what it is in relation to the actors on the set. There is the DP right there going through the set, and we're going to walk in behind him. There are the actors right there. So it's probably about 8 or 10 feet away. It's real simple. And there's the light. That's the beam path where it's shining directly on the actors. And it is the one that's creating the major shadow because it's the most powerful light on the set. Even though the 200 watts closer to them, the 400 watts more powerful. And even after it's being bounced, it's actually still more powerful. So there's the ballast for the 400 watt light. The ballast, like we said before, is the power supply for it. And we can actually go ahead and turn it off from the ballast, which is the power supply. And when we turn it off, there's the effect. And you notice that the outside, the actual window that leads outside, it looks normal. However, you can't see anything inside that room unless you use that HMI lighting, because the light outside is just so bright that without lighting, it's going to look extremely, extremely dark inside that room. So here it is with 3 decibels of gain and then 12 decibels of gain, and you can see how grainy it gets at that point, and then also the outside, the background blows out completely. So it's not a very pleasant frame, at least not to me. I mean, it doesn't look professional to me unless you use some kind of HMI lighting in this particular circumstance. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like these are 2 people sitting in a house as the human eye would see it. So there's the DP, and he's observing his monitor, the set monitor right there. That's the low-cost monitor that he's using right there, and he's comparing it to the monitor behind it. It's a professional monitor, trying to get different readings and seeing what someone at home would actually see on their standard monitor that they would have. In this particular case, now we're going to talk about composition. You'll notice the composition here in this particular circumstance. It actually, whether you can see it right away or not, it matches something we already talked about. When we freeze the frame, we can actually see a triangular composition. And the reason it's triangular is because that plant right there, it's in the center of the frame and it's extremely tall. It kind of almost dominates the frame, but it's not a human being in this particular case, obviously. And therefore, it can't take attention away from the actual people that are in the frame. It's also part of the background and not closer to the camera. But it does form a triangular composition with the people that are in the frame, and also Jake's feet and his legs, you know, the way that he's got him actually bisecting the frame towards the right-hand side like that. So that's the kind of composition that we have right now, and it kind of creates a feeling that Jake is kind of feeling low at this point because there's something in the frame that is taller than him that's kind of overpowering the frame and being dominant, even though it's not immediately obvious, but that is something that's happening. So there's the first, that was position 1 on the dolly, and this is now position 2. And we didn't like how far we moved in. This was way too far. The next dolly shots, we modified it and stopped way, way before we even got that far. Let's freeze the frame here real quick, and we'll talk about another item of composition, that's the lines. You can see that here, the reason that we chose not to go with this particular composition is very flat. There's only one line of axes. There's nothing that leads the eye into the distance, like in this composition right here, which has several lines that lead your eye into the distance. There's one, and it's more diagonal line that kind of goes left and right, left to right, and from bottom left to the top right along the couch. And there's another line that leads your eye into the distance. I know it seems kind of flat, but if you go with the actual angle of the wall and how it's actually going directly into that corner, whenever you shoot into a corner, it's always going to feel like there's more depth to the room. And there's the third line right there as it's going along the wall vertically, as opposed to the way it was before, where it was just 2 flat lines against the couch. We still have, of course, the triangular composition. We already talked about that. That in conjunction with the depth of the lines that lead your eye into the distance, and of course that window where you can actually see outside into the background, it makes for a really nice frame, and it makes it so that you don't want to go so far that you actually get into a 2-shot on these people where they're flat up against the wall. That just doesn't look good. So on subsequent dolly moves, we actually stopped short. We stopped way before we actually got to that final frame like we showed you before on the 2-shot. We stopped where they still have the same exact composition, but we just moved a little bit. We added the dolly for dramatic emphasis so that the dolly itself, the actual dolly movement, would help the dramatic moment at a certain very precise time. Now this is something that I worked out with the DP so that he knows exactly on which line he's going to go ahead and move the dolly. We also worked out the duration of the dolly, how long it's supposed to take, and also the maximum threshold of that dolly, how far it's supposed to go. So this is all stuff that I worked out with the DP, with the actors ahead of time, so that everybody knows exactly what they're doing when the moment arrived. Let's watch it.
You're very right. Okay, how about this? You know how on a novel they have the book jacket with the bio of the author on the back?
Yeah.
What if I do that for each of my characters, like a backstory?
So essentially we moved at the moment of discovery. When he discovered something important, something new that he was not aware of before, he actually came to a conclusion. And when he came to that conclusion, something in his character changed. He's grown beyond where he started the scene. So there's a transition in the scene right now. There's a positive improvement in his personality, in his persona, and his character. He just started the scene extremely frustrated, and with the help, of course, of his ally, and that's Rachel. He was able to positively improve inside the scene and rise up to becoming a better person through research, through actually introspection. And he came up with that idea, you know, because she said, well, you know, maybe you need to do some research about these people. And then he said, well, why don't I just write a little bio like you see in the little book jacket? So there's a moment of discovery, there's a moment of introspection, and after that discovery, that's when the dolly move comes in to accentuate that discovery. So here I want to draw your attention again to set decor, or actually cleaning up the set for HD. This is something that back in the DV days we wouldn't really have to worry about it, but if you are shooting HD as we were in this particular circumstance, every little speck right there is going to count. It actually is going to matter, and you are going to see it in the final product, and it's going to distract the audience because it's this little white dot near the center of the frame. And as we learned from the production DVD, anything that's white near the center of the frame is going to really distract the audience and take their attention away from the important white objects, which are the whites of the eyes of the people in the frame. Those are the whites of the eyes. That's what you want to draw your people's attention to, because that's the life of the character. That's the life of the actors coming through their eyes. So now let me draw your attention to the position of the camera when it's actually seated on the dolly. This is where it's still sitting in the dolly. That's the position of the camera for the wide shot. And if you were to try to go ahead and get a close-up from that very position, which is the position at the very beginning of the wide shot dolly, that is going to be the wrong close-up position. Let's go ahead and take a look at exactly where this dolly is in respect to the actual subjects. There's the DP and there's the subjects right there. There's our actors. And so at this particular angle, you can see that it's too similar to the angle of the wide shot, obviously because it came from that same angle. So what's going to happen is when you zoom in and just try to get a medium shot from that angle, the people are going to look like they're just popping out of the frame and closer to you. It's going to feel like a jump cut. But when you move the dolly, as our DP is right now, to the new position, more of a shallow angle, more closer to the actors and more off to the side, so you can get a better close-up from the one side of the actors as they're looking at each other, that becomes the correct close-up angle. And we're going to see the difference here between the wrong close-up angle and the correct close-up angle and what the final product looks like. And also we talked about lowering the camera or raising the camera in most shots to stay at the same eye level of the actor when you're doing a close-up. This doesn't apply necessarily for when you're doing a wide shot. Wide shot, you have a lot more freedom. But when you're doing a close-up, you want to try to stay on the eye level of the actor. So as the DP here right now is doing, he's lowering the camera to stay at the proper eye line level for the actor. This is primarily, again, for close-ups. You want to be on the same level as your actor for close-ups. Notice how it has a lot more depth to it, and at the same time it's a little bit more flattering to the actor, because when he looks over at Rachel, you can really see his face. Whereas before that, in the wrong close-up right there, he just kind of like, when he looks over, you really can't see him. It's more like a profile no matter how he does it. And it's not a bad two-shot, but as far as a close-up, it just doesn't work. Now let's go ahead and get a close-up of Rachel. So we're going to jump over to the other side and get really close to the couch again, so we get more of a shallow angle on her. And we're going to actually show you the close-up on her. This is the correct close-up position right there. It's close to the couch. It almost feels like she's looking at the camera when she looks over at Jake. So here's the camera position again right there. So you can see exactly where the actors are in relation. There are all the lights. We're keeping the exact same lighting for the close-ups in this particular situation because we lit very soft, so we didn't really need to go any further than that. You can see the set monitor right there and the DP. And you can see the original position of the tripod was over there on the actual dolly track, and we moved it over there, closer to the couch, and about 2 or 3 feet away from the original position, closer to the couch. That way we get that nice shallow angle on the actress with a close-up, and that's the angle that we're going to end up getting through that monitor. There she is again through the correct camera, and notice that she has a little bit too much headroom right there. Just kind of like, feels like she's being cut off at the neck, which is never ever actually a good thing. You're never supposed to cut off the actors at any joint, be it their elbows, their knees, or at the neck. It just feels extremely unnatural. It feels like they're just kind of popping out of the frame there. So you want to always lower the tripod, tilt it or lower it, so that you can get a better, more flattering angle on an actor where you're not cutting them off at any kind of a joint in their body. Now notice when we widened out just a little bit, we went out, just pulled out a little bit. Notice her headroom now is very appropriate. It feels just right because there's a little bit of headroom at the top, but now we're not cutting her off at the joint. We're not actually cutting her off at the neck anymore, so it feels more natural. We can see a little bit of her shoulder. We can see a little bit over her head. It feels like it's a much more nicer, natural frame. And we're, again, I mean, This is just basic laws of composition. When you're composing a shot like this, you never want to cut off any of your performers at any of the joints, and you want to also leave, and this is kind of like a matter of taste and also experience, a little bit of headroom at the top, but not too much, and also a little bit of face room, but not too much. And eventually, once you've been doing this for a while, you'll feel the right proportions. You'll know what's right and you'll know what's wrong, and you won't have to keep referring back to, oh, well, I think I should do this or I think I should do that. You'll just know this is the right thing to do, and you'll just do it. Okay, now we're going to talk about Rachel's apartment that we shot at for the sunset scene. This was a really fun shoot because we only ended up using 2 major lights, and we created something of a sunset look at night. So we're using a warm half white balance card, a warm card, warm half card. We're going to show you the difference between that and a regular white card white balance and a standard preset on the camera right there. So that's the standard preset, 5600K white balance. If you just had a white card on the set and you just took a white balance directly off of that white card, that's the way the colors would look. And then for the last thing, we went ahead and took a white balance off of the warm card's warm half. So it kind of warmed up the tones a little bit, made the sunset look even more sunset-like, and livened up the skin tones a little bit. And we went ahead and kept the warm card's warm half. There's our actress playing with the transmitter right there. We're going to go ahead and change the color phase to -2. The color phase is the part of the camera that leans the settings from green to magenta. So we leaned it a little bit more towards magenta. So see, there was a little bit of a green tint here in the shot, and then we went ahead and leaned it to the magenta a little bit more and away from the green, and that's the look that we got. This is color phase -2. And whenever you have a little bit of a green tint in the shot, be it from reflecting lights off of green walls or because there's just an overall greenish tint in the shot due to the color of the furniture, as in this case, you might want to lean it a little bit more towards the magenta. And now we'll reduce that green tint. So let's do some gamma. This is Cinelike D Gamma Cinematrix, and we're going to go ahead and switch it right now to Cinelike V Gamma Cinematrix. We notice it's a lot more contrast. This is Cinelike D Normal Matrix. The colors have lost a little bit of their saturation. This is Cinelike V Gamma Normal Matrix, so the contrast is there but the saturation is down. This is Cinelike D Gamma Fluoro Matrix. It's very pastel-like. Cinelike V Gamma Fluoro Matrix. The colors are pastel but there's too much contrast. So here's our lighting. We had a 400 watt HMI right there reflecting off of that white card, bouncing back into our actors, acting as a fill. And we also had a 650 watt tungsten ARRI light, and it's reflecting off of that gold reflector and back into their faces, into the frame, and that's creating that golden kind of sunset look. And so the 400 watt HMI is acting as fill, and that little LED panel right there in the bottom left hand side, that one's acting as fill also for Jake's face when he's leaning forward. So let's start with the 650 watt ARRI tungsten light. That one is bouncing off of that gold reflector. This is full gold reflector. It's the same reflector that we're using as a reflector for the HMI, but we just peeled off that gold side and we just attach it to the glass with gaffer's tape. So it's bouncing back into the actors from that direction, and that's what's creating the golden highlights in her hair at this point and also in the master shot. So there it is again, so you can see exactly what we did. We spotted it into that into the center of the reflector, so we can create a little bit more of a specular highlight, more of a tighter highlight, but just from that particular angle. We didn't want it to flood too much and create too much of a large area because the setting sun is a very small specular light that's very far away, and we wanted it to have that exact same feeling. So that's the lighting for that. So you can see it one more time. Again, we're showing you every corner of the set so you know exactly what's going on. Here are the actors, and that's what the light is doing to them. And this is the frame from the A camera, and this is in Cinelike V mode, Cinematrix. And we went to a Cinelike V because we wanted a little bit more contrast. What we're going to do here is we're going to turn on and off that tungsten 650 going through the reflector, and you can see there's a dramatic difference. So this is just a fill light by itself. Nothing else is on, just a 400 watt HMI fill light being bounced off of that white reflector on the left side of the frame. And we're going to turn it back on right now. And here it is. There's the sunset look. Very cheaply made with a 650 watt light bouncing into a $100 gold reflector. So you don't really need a lot of lights on the set to create this kind of a look. It's really not difficult to do. We just did it right now with 2 lights. There's really nothing much more that you need. As long as you put them in the correct places and the correct ratios, they're going to look really good. And we'll show you how to change those ratios and how adding more lights to the set is not necessarily good. So this is the 400 watt HMI, our fill light, being bounced off of that white circular disc. And I'm sorry that the image is very overexposed, but I wanted you to see exactly everything that was going on. So there's the light going into the white reflector, the light path. It's actually spreading out a little bit more than that shows, and then the white reflector is bouncing it back into as a very large source, so it creates almost no shadows, or very, very soft shadows. And we have the HMI dialed down very precisely to create just the right amount of light. And so there are the actors, and that's where the light's coming from to hit them, right there on the left side. And so it's filling them in with this daylight balanced white light that feels like it's just natural white light inside the room. And here we go, we're going to go ahead and turn it on and off so you can see what it's doing. There it is off, and there it is on. Off, on. So you can see exactly how much more contrast you're going to get without that light in the shot. So here we are dimming the HMI up by 1 stop. And you can see it going up right there. And here it is starting to come back down right now. And we're going to show you the freeze frame so you can really see the difference. And that's how important it is to dial in just the right amount of HMI light, because too much is going to flatten the frame too much. It will feel too filled in like a studio. But if you dial it in just right, it'll allow that 650 watt light, the tungsten, going through the gold reflector to be really bright and extremely shimmery and golden. So here it is. This is when it was too bright. We didn't like that kind of look. I mean, other people might like it, but it raises skin tone level a little bit too much, but it also creates those new shadows from her hair on her face, and I didn't like that look. I liked it when it was a little bit lower like that, and it just felt more sunset-like, you know, like there was actually a sunset going on outside, and this is about how much light I felt would be inside the room if there was sunset outside. And, you know, because our eyes correct for those kind of things in real life, and I want it to be real. Here it is dimming right now again. It's going up right there for the close-up, and then back down again so you can see the difference. Up and then down. I know they're very, very subtle changes, but that's how subtle you have to be with HMIs and with other lights on the set. So now we experimented. We added this one more light right here on the right side. It's a 200 watt HMI, and we directed it at them from about the direction of the 650 watt light, but just further to the right and closer to the camera, as though it were another fill light. So we're also, just to kind of show you that even if we went ahead and put a straw gel on the inside to warm it up even more, and this is something you want to be really careful when you're doing this, because that's a very hot bulb, and we have a very professional DP here who's doing that. That's a Joker light right there, and it's not an ARRI HMI. The ARRIs don't have an exposed bulb like that. But when you're doing anything like that, just be very careful, please. But he's adding a straw HMI, or a straw gel to the HMI, which is going to warm up the tone of the light, make it more yellowish, and we're going to see what it looks like coming up here in just a second. And just to show you that adding a third light on the set won't necessarily improve the lighting. Sometimes when you have just the right amount of light, you should just leave it alone, and if it looks good, it just looks good. Adding more light isn't necessarily going to fix it. This is before the HMI, and here it is with the HMI. See, it doesn't feel like a sunset anymore. It just feels like a studio. This feels sunset-like, and then when you kind of, you know, put it on and off like that, you can see that also it's creating a new shadow on the left side of her face and on the back wall, and we didn't like that shadow. You'll see it when it goes off right there. It's just, you know, it's one of those things where adding another light is not necessarily going to improve the lighting in your set. This to us looked a lot more sunset-like. It felt more directional, like there was more light coming in off the right side of the frame. And all we had to do is a little bit of color correction in post to remove some of that green cast, and we were done. And that's with the HMI on again. So we went ahead and removed the HMI from the set. It was deemed too flat, so we went ahead and removed it. But we left it in here just to kind of show you exactly how that works. And so we're going to also add now a light panel. This is the little LED battery operated light, and we're going to put it in the front of the table right there. And the DP right now is putting some diffusion in it right there also. He put a half CTO in it to warm it up, make it a little bit warmer than the HMI light, and also put some diffusion in it. And he's dimming it to just the right amount of light, and you'll see it on Jake's face here as he's dimming it up and down. The reason we added that in there is because when Jake leans forward, he's out of range of that 650 watt tungsten light going through the reflector, and his face was, you know, just kind of like reaped in darkness there. So we added that light, and that's exactly the beam path where it's shining on his face, so that when he leans forward, it feels like that light from the sun is actually wrapping around his face as it would in real life. So here's how it was before, and watch us dimming it up right there to fill in the shadows on his face. And this is without, and this is with. So you can see he really needs something there, because it's just his face is too contrasty. It doesn't feel like it's actually sunset right there. Our eyes, if we were sitting in the room in front of him, would normally compensate for that darkness in his face and it would feel like there's more light on him. There it is on the left side. So we were actually catching it in the dolly shot. So we had to remove it and actually replace it because we didn't want to reframe the shot. Every time we do the dolly, we were seeing it right there on the bottom left-hand side. So we had to do something with the light panel. And when you're happy with the frame, when you're happy with the dolly move, you don't want to go and change your dolly move to compensate for a light like that. Just move the light. So here's the DP attaching a cardellini. You've seen these devices before. We've used them before. He's attaching it gently over to the table, and then he's going to go ahead and use that arm that the light panel is sitting on. He's screwing it into the cardellini. It's a 1/4-20 thread, just standard photographic 1/4-20. And see how he's letting it suspend off the table. And because it's being suspended off the table, that's just enough out of frame, maybe a couple of inches out of frame, but it's enough that it still does its job. But we didn't have to change the position of the dolly, we didn't have to change the position of the camera, or the tilt, or the angle, or the zoom, or anything. Everything else is exactly the same, because we didn't want to change it, we liked it, but now there's no more light panel on the bottom left-hand side of the frame. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to make things convenient for yourself when you're doing dolly moves. You can see the DP here, he's switching the handle of the tripod from the right-hand side, because he's right-handed normally, he operates from the right-hand side. He's switching it over to the left-hand side, and he's mounted a cardellini on the handle right there, which is very ingenious because what it allowed him to do is to be on the left side of the dolly. So he can be on the other side of the dolly and swing that dolly from left to right, and also have kind of like a little turn handle for like an extension for that handle that he can grab with his hand, but in a much more ergonomic way for himself. And we'll show you how he did that here in just a moment. So there's the position of the camera. We noticed also that we wanted to get some other shots and that the camera was too close to the actors. So we couldn't move back any further because the TV was right behind us. So all the DP did, he switched the tripod from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, just spun it around. And the configuration that in the dolly is it always leans the camera more to one side than the other. So when he leaned it back in that direction, he bought us an extra 6 inches or so of distance away from the actors without actually having to move the dolly back, where we couldn't because the TV was right there behind us, so we couldn't get any further back from them. But he bought us that extra 6 to 8 inches that we wanted to get just the right frame, which is another ingenious thing. So the actors are 6 feet from the camera, 9 feet from the HMI reflector, and 5 feet from the gold reflector. That's all the distances right there. And you know what the wattages are. It's a 650 watt tungsten light going through a gold reflector, and it's a 400 watt HMI light going through a white reflector. So we measured the distances to the actors, and we're doing just a 4-foot dolly move. That's it. That's all we're doing, just a 4-foot dolly move. But because the DP switched the handle to the left side and has that cardellini on it, now he doesn't have to be on the other side of it. He can just be on this side and watch the monitor, the LCD monitor, which is on the left side of the camera. So it's just, he really helped himself out in order to create an even better move for us. So there's the actual shot. This is a rehearsal shot. And you can see because we placed some foreground detail in the shot there, which is that small rectangular vase there with the corks inside it, you really get a sense of movement. That's really you have to put foreground detail into these short dolly shots that you're doing. You're not doing a 10-foot dolly move. You're not even doing, a 5-foot dolly move. This is just a 4-foot dolly move, and that's all you need to get the shot that we wanted. We just wanted to get a little bit of movement to dramatize the moment. So now the DP right there is going to move the tripod off of the dolly and off to the right-hand side of the frame so that we can get a close-up. Because you don't want to get your close. We already discussed this before. You don't want to get your close-ups from the original master shot position because the angle is going to be too flat. The actors will not look good. You have to be more head-on into the actor so you can really see their face as they're talking to the other actor. So you shoot across. You always shoot into the face of the actor to get the close-up. You can see in the DP's LCD right there exactly what the shot's looking like. So there's the original position of the tripod. This is on the dolly to get the master shot, and this would be the incorrect position to get a close-up from because it would make too much of a flat angle. You want to move it and get more of a head-on type angle. This is the angle that you would get from the dolly. This is if you wanted to shoot a close-up from the dolly. Notice how it's almost in profile. Everybody's in profile, including Jake, who we're trying to get a close-up of him looking at Rachel. So it's not a very good looking close-up. It's too much of a flat angle. We want to get more head-on into him. So let's see what happens when we move the tripod. So here we are. We're going to move the tripod over to the right-hand side of the frame. This is closer to the couch, closer to the actors, more of a dead-on perspective. You can see it in the LCD of the DP right there, what kind of angle we're going to go ahead and get. This is the new angle. So you can see that the actor, it feels like he's looking dead-on into the camera at this point, almost. He's looking right off of left frame. So it feels a lot more realistic. It feels like he's actually looking at Rachel. It's more flattering to him. We just adjusted a little bit, gave him a little bit more face room later on. So now we're going to go ahead and move the tripod over to the complete other side of the set. That's a hard-working DP right there, I can tell you that. He did primarily most of the labor on the set. And again, like I said, that's what it pays to hire good DPs, because when they don't have people helping them, that's what happens. So there's the shot that we're getting now from that angle. Look at that shot. It's a great shot. You can see her face. You can see her in the best light. The HMI is fully filling in her face. The tungsten light going through the reflector is coming back, and it's making really nice highlights in her hair. We're head on into her face so that we can see the actress in her best form and her best light. And that's what happens when you select the proper angles for your close-ups. So every time you go to a close-up, don't stay on the master shot and just zoom in. Move to a better angle, get a better angle on your close-ups. There's the DP right now, and he's watching the monitor on the left-hand side of the frame, because he wants to make sure that all the colors are right. He wants to make sure that the lighting is right. Because those little LCDs on the cameras, they're good, you know, they're okay, but they're never going to give you the truth like a large on-set monitor will, like that monitor that we're using. So let's talk about composition and framing right now. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that this is a triangular composition. And why is that? It's because both of the actors are looking at the pen. The pen still has its cap on because it's just a rehearsal, but the audience is going to keep bouncing with their eyes from her face to his face to the pen, to her face to his face to the pen, and that creates those invisible lines of movement in the frame. That doesn't just create interest in the frame, it also creates an emotional impact on the audience as well too. What is that emotional impact of having a triangular composition in this particular situation? It is that he is the main character in the movie, right? She's his ally, and there's his achievement on the paper. He is at the apex of that triangle. He's at the top of the triangle. That's the apex right there on the top left-hand side. And he's also centered in the frame. And everything around him is all the things that are good about his life right now. So there's his ally on his right side, and there's the paper, his achievement, and you know, marked by the pen being on the paper right there. And all that is tying into his life and making him seem at this point larger than life, which is important because it's important for us to feel like he's actually achieved something at this point. And it's important for the camera to influence the audience and tell the audience indirectly that he has achieved something now. This is a good thing, what he's doing right now. So the camera can help the audience understand that about him, not just through the dialogue and through the achievement itself. It just works as a frame. And that's the importance of framing and composition. When the frame means something, when the composition means something, and the actor's arrangement and the blocking and their body movements all mean something in the frame, it actually influences the emotional response of the audience. And believe me, they all get it. It's just all on a subliminal level, that's all. We also have color harmony. That's another thing that's working for us in the frame. His shirt is harmonizing with that background. That's why we selected that shirt for this background for the scene. And also her outfit and her skin tone is harmonizing with that wall coloring right behind her. You notice it's almost the exact same tone. All those things matter. It creates a very harmonic frame that where all the colors are in color harmony from foreground to background. They all, and at the same time though, he's separated from the background and she's separated from the background, which is the back wall. And also his shirt, even though it's the same tone as that quilt, that burgundy quilt that's right behind him, he's still separated from it because of lighting contrast. That side light's coming in and it's separating him from that mid-ground quilt. So we have a lot of different layers of action. We have the cork inside the vase in the front. We have the script in the center. We have them in the mid-ground. We have that burgundy background, and we have the back wall background as well too. You have 5 layers, 5 planes of action, 5 different separated layers of color harmony and also color contrast, lighting contrast in one single simple little shot with only 2 lights in it. You can do this. It's easy. It's not that hard to do. You just have to think about every single scene and every single frame with that mentality, with trying to figure out how can I maximize what I already have. Do I really need to go to a studio to shoot this? Can I shoot this in the living room? How can I make the living room feel like it has a sunset going through it? This is how you do it. It's not that difficult. You just have to think creatively and think with composition in mind, and also blocking. The blocking of your actors and the composition of the camera are extremely important to not just adding visual pleasure as far as like actually having a layered nice frame that is pleasurable for the audience to look at, but at the same time it's technically creative and it's very powerful and dramatizes the story. Okay, now let's listen to 4 different audio setups that we had: his lav, her lav, the on-camera microphone, and then a mix, and also listen to what it sounds like when an aircraft is flying overhead. So keep your headphones on, otherwise you'll never hear this kind of stuff.
First draft.
I'm so proud of you.
So what do you think I should do now? First draft.
I'm so proud of you.
So what do you think I should do now? First draft.
I'm so proud of you.
So what do you think I should do now? First draft.
I'm so proud of you.
So what do you think I should do now?
And roll camera, and action. Wait, cut, you got aircraft.
Now I'm just
Now you should
disgusted.
roll this so that people know.
So what do you think I should do now?
Well, I think you should put it away for a while and let it marinate.
Cut. Okay, so those are the two different looks that we were able to achieve for this particular location. It's just a couch in the living room with two people sitting there, but we were able to achieve two completely different looks for two completely different times of day and actually illustrate that both pretty much within about 2 hours of each other and finish the entire location, finish the entire scene in a half a day. So there's really nothing to say that you can't do the same thing. We only used, I think, 3 lights in one and 2 lights in the next. So, you know, it's very simple. Just think creatively and think logically. When you want to create something that feels like it's a setting sun, or you want to create something that feels like it's a rising sun or a mid-afternoon, just think about where would the sun be at this particular time of day. Go out to this location, go out to the actual living room, and look at the light. And you know for a fact that the camera is not going to shoot it the same way. The camera is always going to add more contrast because it can't see the same range of tone that the human eye can. It can't see 17 stops of latitude like the human eye can. It can only shoot about maybe 7, 8, or maybe 9 stops of latitude on a standard, camcorder. Larger cameras can shoot more latitude, but most of the cameras that we have available to us can shoot at maximum about 8 stops of latitude. So when you have that, you're going to have to be very careful with your contrast. The background is always going to be brighter when the sun's outside and you're sitting inside a darkened environment, even though to your eye it looks just fine. So you have to add lighting. But what kind of lighting? That's the question. How much and what kind of lighting and where? And hopefully the more you watch in the series, the more you're going to understand where to put the lights and how much light to add for it to look nice and natural. Okay, welcome to Rachel's apartment kitchen scene. And so what we're going to do in this particular scene is discuss lighting in an extremely small area, which is the kitchen, and also how you can get many different kinds of looks with different gamma settings depending on where you set up your camera for the exact same shot. We did the exact same action 6 different times with 6 different gamma settings. There's our DP setting up one of the ARRI lights right there, and he's attaching it to a milk crate. Those are extremely sturdy production crates that have metal backings on the sides, and he's putting in the key light right there, as you can see it on the right hand side, and he's bouncing it off the ceiling directly up above her head and back down into her face. That's going to be our key light, and the reason it's the key light, even though it's very soft, is because it's going to be the brightest light that's hitting her directly. So there's the key light right there, on and off. And our DP was trying to figure out how to squeeze a fill light into that corner in front of her. So he grabbed this pump cup right there, which is a suction cup device that allows him to attach it to any hard surface like that that's flat and clean. So he went ahead and attached it directly to the countertop surface, and he grabbed a 150 watt tungsten ARRI light, and there he is attaching it to the pump cup right there. And he's going to aim it directly into the wall in front of her, and that's going to be her fill light. There he is plugging it into the wall socket. And there's the 150 right there, being turned on and off. And he tried at first to hit her directly with it, and it was just too harsh. So his next idea was to essentially attach a piece of white paper against the wall right there, just like that in the cupboard, and point the light directly at that white paper and bounce it back into her face. But it wouldn't tilt up far enough, as you can see. So you can see that the arc of the light just wouldn't tilt up far enough. And he didn't want to lower the white card because then it would be too low and it would create the wrong kind of lighting. So the best thing to do in this circumstance, as with most of these ARRI lights, is to unscrew the yoke a little bit And as soon as you unscrew the yoke, it allows you to slide the light forward and back so that you can actually slide the entire light against the yoke and change the way that the light would arc up and down. So watch him actually do that right now. There he is, and he's sliding it forward against the yoke. So now, once he slid it forward all the way against the yoke, and I do mean yoke, Y-O-K-E, not Y-O-L-K, and that's that Y bracket that goes around, that black Y bracket that goes around the light and holds it in place so it can tilt up and down. Now he can actually point the light directly at that white card. So that is the yoke, and that's what he unscrewed in order to make it go forward and back. Okay, so this is where the light's going to be coming up now. It's going to be coming up from the left-hand side, the bottom left-hand side of the frame, and that's going to be her fill light now. So her key light's coming from above, and that's going to be her fill light. And don't forget, we actually didn't move very far to get this kitchen scene. You'll remember that that's the dining table on the left-hand side, and right over here on the right-hand side is where we shot pretty much all of those character problem shots and everything, the dolly shots up against the couch. So all we moved is from right here to right over where the DP is right now, maybe about 12 feet. So we've really capitalized on this setting. We've shot so many different scenes in this one set. Now, in order to get it a proper white balance, we're using the Warm 1 warm card system, and that's allowing us to warm up the tones just a little bit, but not going too far. Remember, the Warm 3 is pretty much the warmest one that you can get. We just wanted to tint the colors just a little bit, and we're going to show you the different all the different colors that we could have gotten here at this point. This is Warm Card's Warm 1 white balance. This is just regular white card white balance, and this is just standard preset tungsten 3200. So you can see why we use the warm cards now. So now you can see our model in the production monitor, and you can notice that on the right side of her face, her hair is not being separated from the background. You can't really see the hair very well. It looks a little bit too dark, and it's her hair in real life is not that dark. So we wanted to add a little bit of a hair light on her. So as you can see, the DP here in the back, he's actually putting up a light stand where he's going to be adding a hair light back there. And that's a 300 watt light. It's a 300 watt tungsten ARRI light. And that's the right position for it because it's going to come in from the right hand side. And there's the light actually right now. And you can see the beam path here, and it's coming in from the right hand side of the frame going towards the left. And here it is lighting her from the right hand side of the frame. It's creating that nice hair light that we wanted. But as you can see, it's only lighting the bottom side of her hair and not the top of her head anymore. So the best way to do that is to actually turn the barn doors so that they're making a vertical streak instead of a horizontal streak across her body from the back. So that's really important. And then also what we did is we went ahead and flooded the light instead of spotting it. And I'll show you exactly what it looks like here live in just a second. But that's what the light looks like pretty much from the light's perspective of what it's lighting. You always want to look at it directly from where the light is so you can see exactly what you're lighting. There is a spot right there, and there's a flood. So when we flood it, we're covering more of an area, and it's less intense. This is Fresnel and flood. That's going to be the range of its influence. This is the Fresnel and spot, and the range of influence has been minimized because it's covering less area, and it's creating more of a highlight right there in the center of the frame rather than flooding the entire area. So now let's talk about scrim. Scrim is what the DP is holding right now in his right hand. It's that circular metal object, and it kind of looks like a kitchen strainer of some sort. So it's like metal, and it allows light to pass through. And what it's doing is actually cutting down the amount of light or the intensity of light, but without affecting the quality of the light or the color temperature. So that scrim right there with the red rim, that means it's going to cut down the light in half. It's going to take a 300 watt light, cut it down to 150, but it will not affect the quality of the light, which means that it'll still be hard light. It won't make it soft. And it will not affect the color temperature, which means it'll affect the intensity only, the brightness, without decreasing the color temperature, like dimming. Dimming will affect the intensity, but will also change the color temperature. It'll make it warmer, which means that the light will become more and more orange-red, instead of just being pure yellow or white. But the scrims maintain the exact same white light. It will not affect the color temperature. So let's go ahead and start putting in the scrims one at a time. We're going to start with the single scrim, which cuts down the intensity by only a half a stop, which is just less than 50%. And here's a single scrim going in right there. Now we're going to take that out, and we're going to put in a double scrim, which is the red rim. The single scrim had the green rim. This one has a red rim, which is this double scrim. That's a double scrim going in right there. Cuts down half the intensity. It's a one stop. Then we also have the triple scrim, The triple scrim has the blue rim, and that cuts down even more than that. That cuts down a stop and a half. And then you can start to double up on your scrim. You can put a triple in and a double if you want to get just that right intensity. This is double, triple scrim. So any combination of the scrim can be used, and they're specialized pieces of metal that can be in front of the light for long periods of time, whether in spot or flood. So in summary, the most important thing to remember is that using scrim does not affect the color temperature of the light. However, dimming affects the color temperature of the light. So you can dim, and it's easier to dim things, you know, and actually just put them on a dimmer, but scrimming will not affect the color temperature or the quality. That's a single scrim. Here's a double scrim. There's a triple scrim. You can just barely see the difference, but it's there. And there's the double, triple scrim. So you can have a lot of different combinations, and even more than the ones I just listed. So we finally have our 3-point lighting setup ready. We have our rim light or kicker, then we have our face light or fill light, and then from the top we have our key light. Okay, so now that we had our lighting set up, we wanted to try to perfect a little bit more. We noticed that she didn't have any catch lights in her eyes, that we wanted to, when we get a close-up, to actually see the highlights in her eyes a little bit more. And also we noticed that because it's kind of a little bit of a dim set, we wanted to actually make her pupils not be dilated, and we actually wanted to have them be constricted so we can see the color in her eyes a little bit more. So we went to our trusty light panel, and we put it right above the camera, as you can see right there, using a Cardellini, which ended up being a little bit safer than actually attaching it directly to the camera. And as you can see, we're turning it on right there. And watch what it's doing to her eyes now. You see that? You can actually see it live. The actual pupil size decreases live. That's where it became when we turned on the light panel, which allowed us to see the green in her eyes a little bit more. And watch what happens when we go back to the way it was before. That's the way it was before, where the pupil size had actually increased, and it was kind of taking over the color in her eyes. All you could see was just the black inside her eye. So when you're dealing with a dim set right there, where you have a lot of very dim lighting, adding a very, very faint eye light from the camera is going to go ahead and constrict the actor's pupil a little bit, without actually, of course, harming them in any way. I mean, that's what these lights were designed to do. They're just designed to go on top of the camera and create catch lights in the eye. But it'll just reduce the pupil size a little bit and allow you to see the color in their eyes a little bit more. And there it is again. So there's our DP right now with his receivers and his fully loaded camera, and it's actually pointing at us. Oh my goodness. So he's very proud of his camera setup right there. It's about as many things as you can pile up on that camera at the same time. It looks really nice though. I mean, I must admit, we had to do this shot just because it looked so nice. Okay, so this is going to be our first take, and we did this at Cinelike D Cinematrix. Each subsequent take from now on is going to be at a whole different gamma setting, just so you can observe an entire take from a different gamma setting, not just a brief freeze frame. Another thing I want to talk to you about is look at the hair and how it's off of her shoulder in this particular shot. And see how she's holding the phone right there? Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the rehearsal and show you what it looked like before we adjusted it. See how her hair was down to her side, and you couldn't see the her shoulder and the rim light hitting her shoulder. And also the phone was too far to the right side of the frame, and it was kind of covering her up a little bit and taking over. But when she turned more towards the left side of the frame, the phone kind of was able to go back against her ear a little bit more. And also we pulled her hair back, which allowed it to rim light her actually side of her body, the right side of her body, and separate it from the environment. So this is Cinelike V Gamma Cinematrix. You'll notice that there's a lot more contrast in the frame. The colors pretty much look the same as when you're using Cinelike D Gamma Cinematrix. However, the contrast range has really been expanded because now her hair looks darker than it was before, and her skin looks a little bit lighter than it was before. So everything's been expanded because Cinelike V Gamma is always going to expand your mid-tone range. Okay, so this is Cinelike D Gamma Normal Matrix. We're back to being kind of grayish, sort of, because we're using a safer gamma. Cinelike D Gamma is grayish, but it's safer. So if you want to be able to play the most with your midtones later on in post, that's what you want to shoot with. However, Cinelike V is going to give you the best range of tones straight out of the box without any kind of manipulation in post-production, because it comes out of the camera ready to go. And also this is Normal Matrix, which is not as saturated as Cinematrix. So now we're back to Cinelike V Gamma Normal Matrix. The last one was Cinelike D Gamma Normal Matrix. This is Cine V Gamma Normal Matrix. So we're back to getting our contrast range, but the colors are still the same. They seem to be a little bit more saturated, but only because, this is only because of our expanded contrast range. we're not actually doing anything different with the colors right here. It just expands naturally with the gamma because of the place and fall of all the midtones. Now this is Cine Like D Gamma Fluoromatrix. Notice how our skin tones are a little bit more reddish. Anything that's reddish in the frame is going to become even more red because that's what Fluoromatrix does. It just boosts the reds in the frame. And this is, of course, again, Cine Like D Gamma, not Cine Like V Gamma. So we're back to having that kind of grayish, maximized dynamic range ready for post. And now the last one we're going to look at is Cine Like V Gamma Fluoromatrix. So this is with the expanded gamma range of the Cine Like V Gamma that comes out of the box ready to go. You don't have to play with it in post. But at the same time, everything gets a little bit darker. All the darker midtones get darker, and the lighter midtones get lighter because you're expanding the gamma range. And this is also with the Fluoromatrix, which is also enhancing all the red inside the frame.